Good morning, everyone, and welcome. As Sari mentioned today, we're starting the third segment of our 12-week forum series on how St. John's can make a difference in our community. And today, very fortuitously, we're starting a segment that talks about dismantling barriers and bridging divides in a variety of areas in Montgomery County. We'll be talking about food insecurity, health issues, issues in the public schools, issues in the Latino and immigrant community. And this morning, we'll be talking about how to bridge divides in an interfaith context in Montgomery County. And I'm sure you'll agree with me that this discussion of dismantling barriers and crossing lines and bridging gaps is especially important in the wake of a very negative, polarizing, and divisive election campaign, and an election that frankly has left a lot of people very uncertain and in some quarters even fearful about the future direction of our country. So we are really lucky in this context to have with us today the Reverend Mansfield Kaseman, please, Casey, affectionately known as Casey to many in our congregation. In his almost 50 years of ministry, he has worked in community organizing, in civil rights, in ecumenical and interfaith contexts in Connecticut, in Massachusetts, in Florida, and since 1979 in Rockville, with parishes, with social service organizations, with NGOs, all with the aim of bridging divides, bringing together different segments of the community and building towards Martin Luther King's concept of an inclusive and just, beloved community. Martin Luther King, in fact, was one of his inspirations. He worked with him as a young man and was reflecting to me that that period is something he's been thinking about a lot lately. So this is a challenging time for people of faith individually and for faith communities collectively to figure out the right way forward. And we're going to take advantage of your great experience working in this area and your current role as the Interfaith Community Liaison Officer here in Montgomery County. He's going into his 4th year in that capacity. He'll tell us what it means. And then I hope we can put the spotlight on some of the crucial issues, critical issues, urgent issues you see, and ways we might get involved in helping. So please join me in welcoming the Reverend Kasey Kaseman.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Kirk. We've been working on this now for, I guess, since June. But who would have known how appropriate when we think of the state of the world today, particularly of our own country, with the divisiveness, the deep wounds that we're called as people of faith to meet. I can't think of a better way than coming together for worship. I've heard that for some of you who haven't been there yet, this is the right place to be, the message that has been delivered. And for us now to be thinking on an interfaith basis, what can be, you're not hearing me?
I'm hearing you. Is everyone hearing?
Does everybody hear me all right?
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
A little higher? Okay.
Okay, very good. So I commend you for this series. I don't know of another faith community that has done anything like this as broadly and deeply as you. So with that said, let me jump right into the way we're organized now in Montgomery County to be working together. Each of you have a piece of paper. The words are the note that went out last Tuesday on the post-election role of the faith communities. That'll give you a sense as to where I'm coming from. You can read that at your own leisure. On the other side is the organizational chart. And I'm sorry that's not the easiest to read. We're not the best in terms of publicity. I need to raise my own money when we have meetings for water, whatever else. But what you see here is that we have Eastern and Western faith traditions working together. If you can't read all the names, my executive committee is made up of co-chairs, very strategically representing different faith traditions lined up in the light of what their own particular expertise and passion is in terms of their own respective ministries. So we have 3 then working groups under the executive committee. One is on land use. Montgomery County allows a house of worship in every zone, and so realtors sell on that basis. Then they find out, of course, as soon as you have an assembly of 50, it becomes commercial and you can be out of business. Last week, we had over 100 people out. I organized 9 county departments and agencies relating everything from environmental protection across to buying, selling, and so forth. So anyway, that's the kind of thing that they do. Oh, and then last September, we brought in the Justice Department, really for the benefit of our own departments, under Ike Leggett, by the way. I'm an appointee of Ike Leggett. That helps me. I operate on the level of department and agency directors. And so when Ike said, okay, we're going to bring in the Justice Department to make sure that not just the faith communities, but the agencies regulating their development all understand the special, unique privileges that faith communities have. Let me jump ahead then to the Neighbors in Need Working Group. The priorities there have been health care, and I wish there was time. Maybe if you have interest in that, we can go on into that. We're very much on the cutting edge and engaging faith communities dealing directly with hospitals and nonprofits, with community-based clinics in ways that serve your parishioners and through you serve the people that otherwise are uninsured and not receiving help because they may be undocumented and so forth. For us, of course, we're all part of one family of God, and we're there to take care of everybody. The other priority for us has been making Montgomery County a hunger-free zone, zip code by zip code. So we ask faith communities to identify with, again, government agencies and nonprofits in their zip code to make sure that nobody is hungry. Our current priority is welcoming our new neighbors. Following I spoke out against the very dangerous rhetoric in the presidential campaign beginning in October. And by November, we had a faith forum, the county executive, county council members, and others. It turned out to be 3 days after the Boston bombing, about the same time. I mean, the Paris shootings. And so there, our governor had already said no to Syrian refugees. So we said we wanted our elected officials to make it clear Montgomery County was different. Here we're all about the beloved community, a place where every basic human need is met and every human right respected. And they did that. And so then we went on, and you all should have, no, I guess you don't. Let me show you quickly. Thank you. We put this together with all the resources that you need relating to refugees and immigrants. And there are 8 different things any faith community can do to be welcoming our new neighbors. 2 weeks ago, Jewish, Christian, Muslims were together at the Islamic Society of Maryland. Hundreds of people. They brought in games for children as a festival experience. 13 refugee families, an opportunity to meet them person to person and get connected. And in the process, come to understand each other across faith lines at the same time. Don't have time to, we're doing other things as well, but if you're interested, we can get to that in the Q&A. The working group that's most active is the Faith Community Working Group. And we have formed what we call the Montgomery County model that's become the gold standard for communities across our own country, in fact, countries around our world, to understand how they like to use the term counter-violent extremism. We much prefer talking about creating social cohesion and public safety. And the reason it works so well is that here in Montgomery County, where we have a richness of diversity, unlike most places in the world, where a third of us are foreign-born, majority-minority community, here, what we're demonstrating is that we can come together and work together. We have trained people, we have Eastern and Western faith leaders on call 24/7 responding to any act of hate or violence in the county. We have now trained and certified 44 faith leaders to be working directly with the police, Fire and Rescue, Office of Emergency Management and Homeland Security, the Department of Health and Human Services, and the Red Cross. We're among the first responders. And if you're interested, we played a very important role when it came to responding, for instance, to the Long Branch fire here, just, and a lot more involved with that. We've now provided training, by the way, to people from over 40 countries. And what pains me with the thought of what's going to follow. By the way, it's been our own State Department that has been funding groups coming in to learn how in America do we work together for the common good and for overcoming violence of all kinds. And so I was in Turkey, for instance, in May for a global conference. And I was the only one there with the model that we have here that's not police-centric, not militaristic. It's community-centric, and it's interfaith. I couldn't deal with all the questions. Is this true? You're a Christian, yes. And you work with imams, and rabbis, yeah, and Buddhists, and Baha'i, and Hindu, and Zoroastrian, and that's what makes this work. Then again, I was asked to go to Philadelphia. That was just 2 weeks ago. Again, funded largely by the State Department. This is, the earlier one, by the way, was Strong Cities. And this last one is the new, it's Welcoming America. They have offices now in 50 states. And they have come in with people from London that are interested in this as well, to be learning from us how we're going about doing that. All of these things, I fear, are going to be, not what we're doing is going to be taken away. That's going to remain very, very important. But I'm really concerned that our approach to the rest of the world and how you deal then with issues of violence could shift from developing appreciation, breaking down the barriers, and working together as we are here, and rather become one of law enforcement, which would be very, very unfortunate. The other thing we're doing is working in the area of education. We have been responsible, working together with the Superintendent and Board of Education, for putting out now in 9 languages guidelines for respecting religious diversity. This is for principals, teachers, guidance counselors, parents. It covers everything from dress to diet to holidays. The other thing we've done is put together, I've now identified as 50-some religious holidays. The schools provide that as an excused absence for any student in any family observing that holiday. And furthermore, we've, especially in the light of the dangerous rhetoric from our presidential candidate through the last year, did a survey of the Muslim community, their students in the public school system. What is their experience? And we put that together, took it to the superintendent and his management team. And what we reported on is, part of this report is on our website. 1 out of 5 of the students had experienced harassment and bullying. 1 out of 3 of the students said, we do not feel comfortable discussing the problem with a trusted adult or peer. 50% said they would like to participate in a youth group with diverse communities to create a network of peer support. Nobody on the level of the superintendent's office had heard anything about this. And we said, that's why we're here. We have, and it's not just the Muslim community, it's all of the ethnic communities in Montgomery County, including the Jewish community. Please, let's not forget. They're feeling very vulnerable, very threatened, and their children are being harassed. And that has increased in the last week. We had a press conference last Friday dealing with the desecration, the 4th time of a Black Lives Matter sign in front of Christ Congregational Church in Silver Spring. So you may have read in the Post yesterday, there was a large group there, and by the way, our Faith Leaders Response Team will have their next meeting there to make it clear to everybody that we're organized. We're going to accept, of course, the new administration, but we're not going to adopt the values of that administration. And we're going to continue to do everything we can to be modeling what it means to be an inclusive community where we can still get about the business of creating, again, a more beloved community. So how close am I to my time limit?
You have about 2 more minutes, 3 more minutes.
Oh, well, my goodness. As a preacher, I have to pat myself in the back here. Because I know what's most important about all of this, of course, are your questions. That's what's going to prove to be the most relevant. So as far as I'm concerned, we could just move. Another thing I noted at the bottom here of my notes, we've been doing, in response, by the way, to the violence in the streets, we held town halls, 800 in Silver Spring, 300 3 days later up in Germantown. And listen, particularly then to the black community, as to what their experience has been right here in Montgomery County. And out of that now we've been doing interracial, interfaith dialogue on racism, seeing the divine in each other. And that's led us to meetings like the folks you see here. And at the end of the last one, a week ago, one of the leaders at a time when the room was just perfectly silent as we were acknowledging the gift of being together across all the racial, ethnic, faith lines, identifying that at that time the focus was on white privilege, of how we're participants and how we need to be dealing with ourselves. And what allows us to do that and encourages and empowers us is the love and forgiveness and understanding of each other. And then the statement was made, look around this room. We are what most of America fears. We are what most of America fears. We're different. We have different colored skins. We wear different clothing. We worship in different ways. Unfortunately, this is a threat. So by the way, one of the things I've already got a letter in, an email, hoping that the Civic Building is going to be available to us on the 20th of January, when we will hopefully have an alternative inauguration. This is going to be nothing of a protest. It's going to be everything of affirming what we in Montgomery County are all about in creating a more beloved community. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we move the podium? We'll go up on the stage. Let's go this way, Kasey. Thank you, please. After you. Yeah, I think so. Yes, please. You wanted to light the candle, Kasey?
Yeah. Yeah, as I thought about this morning, something that my wife, Diane, in the back here, and I have been doing now for some time. At dinner time, what we do is just light a candle in the middle of the table. And what we're finding this week is that for many people that is helpful, regardless of our faith traditions, because it reminds us that no amount of darkness can possibly put out this little flame. This is a symbol, again, that you find throughout all the faith traditions. A week ago, another one of the things we do is we bring together the different faith communities for their high holidays into the county executive building. And we had to cut it off at 350. This is for Diwali, the festival of lights for the Jain, Sikh, and Hindu communities. There we greet each other with Happy Diwali and with Namaste. Namaste means, the divine in me acknowledges the divine in you. So in lighting the candle, what we within the interfaith community are understanding, at this point, we're acknowledging that all of us are made in the divine image. And for us to be facing into the challenges in the days ahead, what's most important is that we remain people of prayer, people connected with that divine image, people connected with the love that's far more powerful than all forms of loveless power. Enough of the sermon.
Bravo. No, thank you. So, Kasey, thank you for a stimulating presentation, and I wanted to start by thanking you personally for your long life of service in seeking to bridge divides and to address needs in our society and community. And I am especially grateful for the insights you've given us today. So let's start by thinking about the immediate environment and what you see as the greatest needs in reaction to the uncertainty that we have now in our political climate, and ways that our church could get involved in helping to address those needs, and ways that you in your position with your team is trying to do that.
Well, right now it's being sensitive to anyone around us, on the street, in the grocery store, at the office, who are of a different complexion, wearing particularly the hijab. Simply to smile, or just to say, I'm with you, can make a world of difference. Everyone is trying to keep up a brave front. But I can tell you, some within, and it's not just the Muslim community, others as well, who are serving on commissions, who are in positions, professionals. I mean, people who you think, whoa, I wish I had that kind of skill and demeanor and ability, are afraid. And children now are afraid to be going to school because they think their parents are going to be deported. Therapists had to be brought in to a couple of the mosques this week to help parents deal with that. Well, that's another thing that we're doing. Well, I'm sorry that I'm getting away from the question, is what more could you all be doing? This by itself, as small as it might seem, can make a world of difference, and who knows where that conversation could lead.
It's not small, it's immediate. It's something we can do starting today, every single one of us. So thank you, it's a great suggestion. And thank you also for reminding us that we actually have a lot to be proud of in our long tradition of inclusiveness and tolerance and fighting discrimination, and advancing those values remains extremely important. How do you
but I'm afraid we kind of take that for granted, of course. But then it's important to be showing up, even on short notice, for the kind of press conference on Friday. We need to be with whoever is going to be saying, this is unjust, this is wrong, this is not reflecting Montgomery County. And by the way, here in Montgomery County, to have a county executive.
So supportive.
Yeah, and an office of community partnerships. I work in an office. Our primary goal is to make Montgomery County the most welcoming county in America. And there are liaisons to the African, to the Asian, to the Middle Eastern, to the Latino, and to the African American communities. So we're well organized, but it's always a challenge, though, to get people out in support of the things that we're doing.
So 95% of life is showing up, and it's important to do that.
Woody Allen.
Woody Allen, exactly, exactly. Well, thinking a little bit longer term than the immediate, what do you see as the challenges that your office and your team will need to address, and where will you need support from faith communities like ours?
Thank you, thank you. It's going to be in maintaining and developing the teams that I've just identified. I can see increased need for responding to acts of hate and violence and responding to emergencies. I think that but the bigger thing over all of that, though, Anne, is seeing hopefully you have some interest in developing partnerships with other faith communities. We all grow in our own faith personally when we're confronted, if you will, with other beliefs, and they're asking us, why are you Christian, or why are you an Episcopalian? What does this do for you?
Have you seen models for how to develop that kind of a relationship that have been particularly successful between faith parishes and faith?
That's what we find every time we come together with our, of course, that's now for faith leaders, but we also have it within these different working groups. That's one of the benefits that people have when they tie in with any of this, is that when you're coming to work on health care or welcoming refugees or hunger in any of this, you're meeting people with their faith traditions. No, I intentionally I'm not into comparative religion. Now, what's spinning out of this are groups that are meeting to become more familiar with each other. But I'm focusing on particular issues, out of which grows an interest in interfaith work.
And could you talk a little bit more, we still have a few more minutes before questions, about the faith community response teams and what they do in schools, for example?
Yes. We're working now on the level of the superintendent and the management team and with the Board of Education. It was no small matter getting the holidays acknowledged after the Board of Education had said they weren't going to acknowledge any religious holiday. Now they have all of them. That was significant. And we're going to want to be defending the Muslim community. And I say, let's get down to it. Those of you with children in the school system, for you to be helping your children understand that this is a time to be befriending friends that they may not have yet. And for you then to be thinking of what might be done, reaching out family to, parent to parent, family to family, that. And then bringing any issues that you see, to bear. I've been on the phone this week 4 times with the police, for instance. Teachers are talking to me. You can imagine, 6 a.m. Wednesday, what do we tell our children? There are a lot of issues here deserving the perspective of faith and of love, and not just being angry and firing back, but saying this is a time to be caring about each other in a deeper way.
And maybe just before we go to questions, you could talk a little bit about the fact that Montgomery County actually has a vision of the beloved community. And Montgomery County at the level of government is driving towards the values that we as faith communities are driving towards.
Yes, yes, yes. It was remarkable, again, within 2 weeks of the faith leaders saying, come on, because of where our governor is, we in Montgomery County need to be doing more by way of welcoming refugees. And it was unanimous that that's what has to happen. And we have now 20-some faith communities already engaged. And again, our model for doing this, you can do it yourselves. It'd be wonderful if you all wanted to sponsor a family. And I'm meeting this week with Interfaith Works. We want to adopt their model of Friends in Action for working with the families. And so that's a very safe, proven model that would be helpful. But beyond that, what I'd like to see would be for you all to be working with the Muslims and the Jews and the Hindus and others, working with refugees coming in from various countries, from various faith traditions. And we're intentionally wanting now faith communities to be sponsoring a family outside of their own faith tradition. It's good for us all.
Well, I think we'll turn right away to questions because we need more time today, perhaps, for discussion with the audience. Please, Lizzie, did you have your hand up? John will give you a microphone.
So, are you thinking then that this, one thing, we're a big church, we're a dynamic church, and I think we have already resettled a family. So I'm thinking it might be something bigger than, I mean, if it's refugees, there's a lot to do with refugees. If it's working with different denominations, not just refugees or Muslim or whatever, what do you think that we might, how do we address that? So behind you it says, how can we make a difference? How can we do that without just resettling or working with a refugee family?
Yes, maybe I should have mentioned, Kasey, that St. John's has provided furnishings for an apartment for an Afghan family. And then some parishioners of ours have followed up on that, and we are thinking of following up again. But thus far, it's been furnishing an apartment. You mentioned that there are 20 faith communities involved in your efforts. Maybe you can give us an idea of what they're doing.
Okay. Well, it's similar things, and we need to add you, kind of to that list, because part of what we're wanting to do is to put out examples and to encourage others and to be learning from each other. And we're finding that the further you get into this, the more questions there are, and we are working with all of the agencies responsible for the settlement to be able to answer those. We don't know yet what it's going to mean by way of advocacy. We don't want to prejudge the incoming administration. On the other hand, we can't just assume that they're going, based certainly on what's been said. And in the light of that, I think we're going to need to be prepared to be doing a lot more in the area of political advocacy relating to Annapolis as well as to Capitol Hill.
And of course, the Episcopal Migration Ministries are also very active in advocacy in Washington. So that's another area we can look into.
Mm-hmm.
Any other points on that one, or shall we go to next question?
Yes, that'd be fine.
Hi, good morning. I'm Mexican, and so my kids have, were exposed to the gamut of what was happening directly to Mexico. I can't speak for my government, but I certainly think that my kids are anxious about how to respectfully, a nationality is not a religion, but it certainly has a lot of values that come with it. And we take pride in being American, and we take pride of being Mexican. They have never had to choose, and I hope they don't have to. But their concern are for example, Margarita, that works for us. And Margarita's son was born in this country, but she wasn't. And she was one of the families that wants to go through the process that President Obama allowed to be able to stay here. And since that is an uncertainty, my kids are concerned about that. So is there anything that you see in your work that will help us as a family to reach out and help someone in that structure? I know you were more into the faith aspects to it, but besides the clearly intentions or understanding of the Muslim community in the United States, there was also a very clear understanding of what the policy may be for Mexico.
Thank you.
So they're, obviously we are of many different religions as well.
Two things pop to mind as you're speaking. I'm wondering, knowing that your church has a strong ministry with children and youth, it may be a matter of bringing parents together to talk about your own experience and find some comfort and encouragement yourselves, but then perhaps some help in knowing how. And it could lead you also then to being there for principals and for teachers who are really struggling right now because they need to be respecting the kids that are coming in with the Trump hats and are putting down other people. And then on the other hand, knowing that there are children who are crying and children who are afraid to come to school under these circumstances. So I'm becoming more active, maybe in the PTAs, but beginning with our own faith communities. I think that's, yeah. The other idea would be to have Nestor Alvarengo. He is our liaison for the Latino community. He's one that's been taking the lead on our assimilating now close to 1,000 children fleeing violence coming across the border from Mexico. That's something else we've been doing without much of any fanfare here in Montgomery County, but there's a real need for people to be more aware of that and supportive of it. Thank you.
So we were notified this morning that last night the Episcopal Church, our Church of Our Savior over in Silver Spring in Hillendale, was vandalized. I don't know if everybody knows about this. They vandalized the memorial garden and the sign, and they put up Trump Nation, whites only. How do we respond to something like that as individuals, as a church community, and what does your organization do to facilitate awareness of this sort of situation, and where do we go with that? What do we do? How do we face it and say, no, this is wrong, and do it in a strong enough voice that it's heard?
Well, I referenced the press conference last Friday. You should know that I'm on call 24/7. As soon as there is an incident of hate or violence in Montgomery County that goes into police headquarters, I hear about it. And they trust me to know that that's going to be handled in an appropriate way. So we need to be there with the victims and supportive of it, and we need to be making a public statement so people know that here that's not going to be tolerated, it's wrong. On the other hand, I think we as people of faith need to be understanding on a deeper, more prayerful level for these divisions, for this kind of act of hatred to be dealt with in a way that's really going to be helpful in the long haul. can't be compatible. Last night, for instance, I did not go for the first time to the Montgomery County Muslim Foundation's annual dinner. That's something else y'all can do. When there are these kinds of events, come. Just be present. They understood because I was going into the world premiere of The Sultan and the Saint, dealing with St. Francis and a peacemaking effort that was done during one of the Crusades, for his going across the battle line, the threat of his own life, connected with the Sultan, who in turn ended the last crusade by doing this. They were being highly successful. These Christians had moved on into Egypt. They knew that would be the way of taking control of the entire Middle East. They didn't know the terrain. The Egyptians flooded them. They could not move. They were setting ducks. They all could have been killed. Because of St. Francis, the Sultan decided, knowing they were starving, he sent food for the people, for the warriors, and he sent grain for the horses. They never fought again. I think that's, again, another highly appropriate message for where we are today.
Kasey, so getting back to that, you bring up, we are certainly going to be facing, it appears, a number of responses to violence and hatred and all that. And what we're looking at is, and that's a very critical thing to do, and to do our ongoing what we are doing in terms of supporting. But looking out, how can we get at the roots of where this hatred begins to happen, and in a compassionate, loving way begin to direct some of those energies into constructive areas? What are the mechanisms? What are the communities, and what do those look like? What are they shaping up in your head? I'm just interested on how we can really get at the root, not put a Band-Aid on it, but really get at the core of it, and really direct our energies and our considerable resources to creating the institutions and the mechanisms, the things that you were talking about. How can we actually on the ground begin to do that? And what does that look like? And this is not an easy question, but this is what we're here for.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I wish I knew. I've been careful not to put anything out publicly this week. You have what I put out last Tuesday, and there I was anticipating, I think I talked about the need for us needing to be compassionate ourselves, and to understand that for perhaps the majority of the people voting for Trump, they're feeling very vulnerable. They're feeling unheard. They're feeling like they're the victim. At least speaking for myself, what I still cannot get over was the rhetoric that I began speaking out against. I wanted us to nip that at the bud. And by the way, our faith community, in my mind, as a whole, failed us. I was criticized when I spoke out against. And we had, by the way, a public forum at the Civic Building that drew in well over 100 on dangerous speech. Those are the kinds of things that we'll continue to do. And that's an issue that we're going to need to continue to monitor and do whatever we can about. But that can eclipse what's going on underneath it. To think that all the people that voted for Trump agree with everything he was saying, I think that's not true. That's not. I think that's wrong. So we need to be kind of sensitive to where they're coming from. But then, as people again of faith, we need to be thinking about how, we need to get back into kind of where we were back in the 60s and 70s with faith communities coming together on a denominational and interfaith basis now to say this is intolerable. And it may mean, I don't know if it's going to mean a march on Washington. It's certainly going to mean getting to the senators and, lobbying on Capitol Hill with regard to some of these issues. I cannot, what I was wanting to do, but I just don't have the administrative assistance for getting it done. I was going to cherry pick the statements that I thought would be most helpful to clergy needing to preach this morning. My goodness. Yeah, please keep your pastor and the staff of this church in your daily prayers and support them in whatever way you can. So I'm sorry, they had the question though.
Have you seen any indication that there's stirring?
Yes, okay. Oh my goodness, yes.
We can work together in a positive
Well, see, there are a number of interfaith alliances. This is something we have to wake up to. That's in place. It's a matter now of empowering it. Diane and I, for instance, last fall were at the World Parliament of World Religions. I mean, 10, 12,000 people from all over the world, and from our own country, organizing with regard to refugees, to the environment, to hate and violence, and all of these things. So it's a matter of becoming more informed. And then perhaps, again, back in the civil rights era and in the peace movement time, we had strong networks that we just don't have now, organizations, I should say. We don't, yeah, we don't. Now, I think we have the potential for that, like with the World Parliament of World Religions. What's happening here today, by the way, is not unique to the United States. My dear friend Charles Villavicencio, the ranking theologian for South Africa, whose book on a theology of Reconstruction provided the basis for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where he was chief of staff, called me to thank me for what I was doing. And both of us were teary-eyed thinking back. We keep thinking we've kind of gotten to a certain level, and then we fall back for decades. And he was saying, Kasey, he said, what's going on here? This is kind of the way the world is turning. And what we need to remember is, the gospel. And you get to the core of the gospel, and there is that scary, I think he used the word a terrifying figure that calls us to sacrifice in the name of love, believing that in the power of love, and with it the mandate of justice that comes with all of that, that proves to be more powerful than even death itself. In other words, we need to become far more serious with regard to the relevance of our faith to our own individual witness and our commitment to setting aside at least some time and money to push these other agendas forward.
And to do it in a way that is loving.
Yes.
The hardest thing, I think, when you're in an environment like this.
Yes.
Remember that we're called to love.
Yeah, when I think of, I'm not going to be mentioning names for obvious reasons, but I have, when I think of what my friends are going through in other faith traditions today here in Montgomery County, and they're the most loyal and supportive with emails through this week, and anytime I'd call a meeting, they'd be there. That's what keeps me going. And big part of my challenge right now is to awaken my own Christian community, to get on and do what I know you're all planning to be doing here. So that's why I'm just grateful for you and for this morning.
We're trying to record this. So.
Yeah, it will record your question if you use the mic.
Well, I was just wondering how to stay involved and how do we find out about events and ways to
Oh,
stay
thank
involved.
you. I do happen to have a sign-up sheet here. So, and you can see I could get a little long-winded with my notes, but if you drop down off the note on the bi-weekly, it gets to, thank you, because then you will have 10 to 15 or more interfaith events going on in Montgomery County now. Thank you. And then you could, pick and choose. So, thank you. By the way, that reminds me, the flyer I have there for the Faith Community Working Group, this was over a year ago, there were anti-Muslim bus ads. Remember that on Metro? And so right away, our group said, we need to protest. Kasey organized a meeting, get out the county executive and others, and so we did this at Rockville Metro Center. But by the way, the Muslim community said, no, we don't want this. So I said, okay, we're not going to do it, but let's take some time for some prayerful reflection. They came back in about 2 weeks and said, we'll try it. They could not believe that there were Buddhist monks, Franciscan brothers, rabbis, Christian pastors, and others standing up, speaking out in defense of them. They had never experienced this anywhere in the world before. And those are the kinds of occasions for your presence can make a world of difference.
So I know people in shock, and usually just I want to do something. I'm probably get yelled at when I get home, but I don't want to be political. I think you can look at though the reality of the situation are I think the two most powerful people in our country are the heads of the DNC and the RNC. So right now, both of those leaders are thinking about who the candidate they're going to present in 4 years for us. So I think one tangible thing we can all do is communicate to those people the type of candidate that we want to see in 4 years. We want candidates that represent all Americans and not us versus them. So that's something you can tangibly do. And we have the unique opportunity that they live right around the corner from us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think there was another question here.
Yep.
If I were thinking along the lines of being in your shoes, one of the things that I would consider would be, is there a way for me to understand better if there is a white supremacist kind of organization, or if there is a sort of a hate group, so to speak. I know probably it's not exactly an organization that you would want to or normally communicate with, but I kind of feel like there might be a way to have a dialogue with sort of an opposition group at some point that could be fruitful. For example, I would think that maybe a white sort of supremacist group, the base of their feelings might not be so much about race, but in the end it might be more about jobs, and we don't have work or something like that. And there might be bridges that can be made and some reconciliation. I just wonder if you could comment on that sort of idea.
Well, we're always wanting to bring people together across the full spectrum of perspectives, and right now in Montgomery County we do not have self-affirming white supremacists. We have that kind of activity, clearly. Flyers have gone out with swastikas several places this week. But it's hard to bring them into a public arena.
But it's the right concept. It's consistent with everything you said about trying to understand the other.
Thank you.
We're not monolithic.
Right. Again, and then we're all sisters and brothers of one human family. Let's remember the candle. Remember that we're all made in that divine image, and we need to be relating to each other, in that way. We need to be holding that in our own hearts, as challenging as that is. By the way, I left my on my letter. There is the email address, if that's another way to kind of get on the mailing list if you want to do that, and our website. I'd encourage you to check out our website. It's always not quite up to date, but you'll find a lot there. And if any of that interests you, just simply get in touch with us. We'd love to be working with you.
Well, let me thank you again for a very stimulating presentation and for giving us some concrete ways we can get involved. Thank you.